Have you noticed the dinner invitations becoming less frequent? Phone calls from family shorter? Friends who once made time for you suddenly too busy? It's a painful reality many of us face as we age, feeling increasingly isolated, sometimes by the very people we've loved for decades. This isn't easy to talk about, but here's a truth that might surprise you. Sometimes it's not just them, it's us. After 70, we can develop certain habits that unintentionally push people away, often without even realizing it. Today, we'll explore 6 specific behaviors that might be damaging your relationships, from boundary issues to negativity patterns. But here's the good news. Once you recognize these patterns, you can change them. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about bringing your best self forward in your golden years. If you're finding this valuable already, please take a moment to subscribe and comment with your city below. It helps us reach more people just like you. Now, let's start with perhaps the most surprising reason people might be keeping their distance. 1. The boundary blind spot, not respecting personal space. When Martha turned 75, she couldn't understand why her daughter seemed less enthusiastic about her weekly drop-ins. "I'm just checking on her," Martha told her friend. That's what mothers do. What Martha didn't realize was that her good intentions were crossing an invisible line that had shifted over time. As we age, one of the most significant challenges we face isn't physical, but relational. Understanding that boundaries change while our perception of them often stays frozen in time. In America especially, where independence is celebrated from childhood, each generation defines personal space differently. Think about it. When we were raising our families, an unexpected visit from a parent might have been welcome help. But today's busy adults often structure their limited free time carefully. That unannounced Sunday drop-in might disrupt your daughter's only chance for self-care that week. The digital world has created entirely new boundaries many of us never had to navigate. When you comment on every Facebook photo of your grandchildren or expect an immediate response to your text messages, you might be inadvertently creating tension. Your adult children and grandchildren live in a world where digital space is as personal as physical space. These boundary issues extend beyond family. Perhaps you've found friends becoming too busy to take your calls, or neighbors seeming less chatty than before. When we repeatedly cross others' boundaries, even with the best intentions, people begin creating distance to protect their space. Instead of feeling hurt or rejected, try this approach. Ask before visiting, limit phone calls to agreed-upon times, and respect a delayed response to messages. Remember that your loved one's need for space isn't rejection. It's a natural human requirement. The generational difference is real. Many of us grew up when doors were unlocked and neighbors walked in freely. Today's world operates differently, not because it's colder, but because it's more complex. The bottom line? When you respect the boundaries others have set, they'll actually want to spend more time with you. The space you give becomes an invitation to come closer on terms that work for everyone. What boundaries have you noticed changing as you've gotten older? Have you found certain approaches that work better than others? 2. The negativity trap. When complaints overshadow connection. Robert was puzzled when his grandchildren seemed less excited about their weekly dinners. "They used to love hearing my stories," he told his doctor. What Robert didn't realize was that his stories had gradually transformed into complaints about politics, his health, the neighborhood, and kids these days. It's a change that happens so gradually, we rarely notice it ourselves. As we face the legitimate challenges of aging, health concerns, loss of loved ones, changing neighborhoods, our brains actually become more attuned to negative information. Scientists call this negativity bias, and research shows it often intensifies as we age. It's not your fault. It's your brain trying to protect you by spotting potential threats. Think about your recent conversations. Did discussion of a beautiful day quickly turn to complaints about the humidity? Did a family gathering become a forum for listing your aches and pains? Did you find yourself telling the cashier at the grocery store about everything wrong with the world today? When negativity dominates our interactions, something painful happens. People begin to associate our presence with feeling worse, not better. They love us, but they mentally prepare themselves for the emotional drain before picking up the phone or stopping by. Try this simple approach instead, the 1-to-3 ratio. For every legitimate concern you share, aim to mention 3 positive observations. This isn't about denying reality or being artificially cheerful. It's about balance. Here's a practical technique. Place a small object, like a coin, in your pocket. Each time you catch yourself complaining, touch it as a gentle reminder, then shift to something you appreciate. This matters because research from Harvard shows that relationships filled with gratitude last longer and feel more satisfying. When you express appreciation rather than just dissatisfaction, you create connections instead of distance. The bottom line? People aren't avoiding your problems. They're avoiding feeling depleted. When you balance necessary venting with genuine appreciation, they'll look forward to your calls rather than screening them. What positive thing caught your attention today? How might sharing that change your next conversation? 3. The balance of give and take. Expecting too much without reciprocating. Dorothy was confused when her neighbor Janet started making excuses about why she couldn't drive her to doctor's appointments anymore. After all I've done for her over the years, Dorothy thought. What Dorothy didn't recognize was how the relationship had gradually become one-sided, with Janet giving and Dorothy receiving, without acknowledgement of the sacrifice. One of the most challenging transitions as we age is the shift from being providers to sometimes needing more support. This change can be particularly difficult in America, where self-reliance runs deep in our national character. Yet failing to recognize this shift can slowly erode even our closest relationships. Think about your different relationships. With adult children, you might expect regular calls, visits, and help with tasks. But they're juggling careers and possibly raising their own children in a more demanding economy than we faced. With friends, you might rely on them for rides or assistance without recognizing they may have their own health concerns. With neighbors, you might expect the same level of help you once provided, forgetting that their circumstances differ from yours. What many of us don't see is the hidden cost of support. Your daughter who drives you to appointments may be using precious vacation days. Your friend who helps with groceries might be managing chronic pain herself. Your neighbor who fixes your sink might be stretched thin between multiple commitments. Instead of focusing only on what you need, look for ways you can still contribute. You don't need physical strength or perfect health to give back meaningfully. Share your wisdom when asked. Offer to make phone calls or address envelopes. Listen genuinely when others need to talk. Send handwritten notes of appreciation. Keep track of important dates in their lives. Perhaps most importantly, express genuine gratitude. Research shows that feeling appreciated is more important to caregivers than almost anything else. A heartfelt, "This means so much to me," can transform a burden into a blessing. The bottom line? People don't mind helping when they feel valued. When relationships maintain some balance, even if that balance looks different now, they remain strong instead of strained. Remember, mutual respect doesn't require equal capabilities, just equal appreciation. Have you found meaningful ways to give back despite physical limitations? What small gesture of gratitude might make a difference to someone helping you this week? 4. Embracing the present, adapting to today's world. "That's not how we did things in my day," Frank told his grandson, who tried showing him how to video chat. Later, Frank wondered why his family seemed to include him less in conversations about new movies, technology, or current events. What Frank didn't realize was that his resistance to change had built an invisible wall between generations. Many of us who've lived 7 or more decades have witnessed staggering transformations. Americans born in the 1940s and 50s grew up with rotary phones and now live in a world of smartphones. We've seen cultural shifts that would have been unimaginable in our youth. It's natural to feel overwhelmed or even resentful of these changes. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When we consistently resist adaptation, we isolate ourselves. When every conversation includes phrases like, "Back in my day, things were better," or "I don't understand why people need all these gadgets," we unintentionally tell younger generations that we've stopped participating in their world. Think about family gatherings where the conversation turns to streaming services, social media, or current events. Do you engage or withdraw? When grandchildren want to play a video game with you, do you try or dismiss it as nonsense? These small moments of connection or disconnection add up over time. You don't need to love every new trend or master every technology. Instead, approach change with curiosity rather than judgment. Ask questions instead of making pronouncements. Try saying, "I'm not familiar with that. Could you tell me about it?" rather than, "That sounds ridiculous." Start small with technology. Many libraries offer free classes specifically designed for seniors. Consider a simplified smartphone with larger text and fewer features. Ask family members to help you set up one new application each month, whether it's a video chat program or a photo sharing app. Remember that adapting doesn't mean abandoning your values or wisdom. It means creating bridges between your experience and today's reality. The bottom line? People naturally gravitate toward those who show interest in their world. When you demonstrate willingness to adapt, even imperfectly, you signal that you're still engaged in life, making others more eager to include you in theirs. What's one small change you've successfully adapted to recently? How did it affect your relationships? 5. The wisdom paradox: when advice becomes criticism. "You should really be saving more for your children's college," Eleanor told her daughter during a lunch. She couldn't understand why her daughter suddenly became quiet and changed the subject. After all, Eleanor had only shared what she'd learned from her own experience. What Eleanor missed was how her well-intentioned wisdom landed as judgment rather than help. By our 70s, we've accumulated a lifetime of hard-earned knowledge. We've weathered financial crises, raised families, navigated career challenges, and learned countless lessons the hard way. It's completely natural to want to spare loved ones from making similar mistakes. Yet what feels like helpful guidance to us often feels like criticism to others. When we tell our adult son he's disciplining his children incorrectly, we're not just offering advice, we're questioning his competence as a parent. When we suggest to a friend that her health problems might improve if she lost weight, we're not just being helpful. We're implying she doesn't know what's best for herself. This dynamic has become more complicated in modern America, where each generation faces unique challenges. Your financial advice might not apply to today's housing market. Your parenting suggestions might not account for current realities. And few people, regardless of age, receive unsolicited advice gracefully. Instead, try the ASK method. First, await an invitation before offering guidance. When someone shares a problem, ask, "Would you like my thoughts on this?" rather than immediately providing solutions. Second, share briefly, focusing on your experience rather than directives. "What worked for me was," instead of "you should." Finally, keep open-minded about their response, recognizing they may choose differently. Consider phrasing suggestions as questions. "Have you considered?" rather than "you need to." Or frame advice through your own experience. "When I faced something similar, I found that." Rather than "the right way to handle this is." The bottom line, your wisdom is valuable, but it's most appreciated when it's requested. When people feel respected in their autonomy, they're far more likely to seek your guidance rather than avoid it. Have you found certain ways of sharing your experience that people seem more receptive to? What approach has worked best for you? 6. Living in the now, finding balance with the past. When I was your age, James began for the third time that evening. He noticed his grandson's polite but distant smile, the same one he'd seen increasingly often at family gatherings. What James didn't realize was that his constant journeys into the past were creating a disconnect with those living in his present. Our memories are treasures, especially as we age. Psychologists tell us there's a reason we often find ourselves revisiting earlier decades. Reminiscing provides comfort, reaffirms our identity, and helps us make sense of our life journey. Our stories matter. They represent wisdom earned through experience. Yet there's a delicate balance. When conversations consistently circle back to how things were back then, we unintentionally signal that we're more invested in what has been than what is. When family dinners become history lessons rather than exchanges. When every new topic triggers a comparison to the past, people begin to feel like audiences rather than participants. You might notice subtle signs, the polite nods, the gradual steering of conversations away from you, or the way younger family members talk among themselves while you sit nearby, included but somehow separate. Instead of abandoning your rich history, find ways to make it relevant. When sharing memories, look for connections to current situations. That reminds me of something similar I experienced. Rather than, things were so different when I was young. Ask questions about others' experiences before sharing your own. This creates dialogue rather than monologue. Try the one memory per gathering approach. Share your best story rather than multiple recollections. When you make each memory special rather than constant, people lean in rather than tune out. Most importantly, focus on creating new memories alongside honoring old ones. Participate in activities that matter to your loved ones, even if they're unfamiliar. Ask questions about their world. Show curiosity about their experiences. The bottom line? Your history is valuable, but relationships thrive in the present moment. When you engage with today while selectively sharing yesterday, you create connections that bridge generations rather than divide them. What new experience have you enjoyed recently that created a fresh memory worth sharing? How did it feel to create something new rather than revisit the past? We've explored 6 relationship-straining behaviors: boundary issues, negativity, one-sided expectations, resistance to change, unsolicited advice, and dwelling in the past. Small adjustments in each area can transform how others respond to you. These changes don't require reinventing yourself, just becoming more mindful of how you interact. While ageism exists, focusing on what you can control is empowering. Your lifetime of wisdom remains invaluable when shared with respect and awareness. The connections you nurture today can make these truly your golden years. What relationship has improved when you made one of these adjustments? Share below. Your story might help someone else on this journey.